And so I had this like aha moment of like, if families are willing to pay me $85 an hour, what could I do? What were the like wins from that business model to figure out what could I do with technology to make it more accessible to more families so that they weren't getting into these problems or trouble areas. They're more proactive and ready for these situations. And that's when, it's kind of when I think we first called ourselves Guff Care or something awful, but we ended up becoming Primary Record.
Hey guys, it's Jesus from LowCode, and today we have Jean Ross with us here today. We have been working with Jean for quite a while, and she's a nurse, and we have been building this pretty cool and complex app for Jean and her partner. So Jean, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, thank you, Jesus. I'm a nurse by training. But weirdly, before becoming a nurse, I studied the business side of healthcare. I got a master's in healthcare administration, which led me into the financial side of healthcare, which I absolutely deplored and hated. And when I was about to have my first child, I thought about becoming, what would I want to be? What do I want to be? And I ended up going back to school to become a nurse. I loved critical care, and I spent about 6 years doing that, which is very prone to burnout just because of what you do for patients and for families. And part of that role is I got to jump around in my hospital to all kinds of units. And when I started jumping around in healthcare, my eyes started opening up to how siloed each section of it was. And I started paying attention to why were some of my patients doing so well and some were not. And it always came down to these families, when they had a family support around them that was educated or aware of what was happening. And due to some kind of family circumstances and just that burnout, I ended up leaving the hospital setting and decided to naively start my own business where I would coordinate care for older adults in my community. Luckily, I had a business degree, so I had some sense of how to run a business, but no concept of what it was like outside of the hospital. And
so was
what
the
I
idea
found,
to manage people that went to the homes of elderly and took care of them on a day-to-day basis?
so what I would do is, what people often don't realize is there's this huge chunk of management in healthcare that falls on a patient. But when that patient is older or has dementia or has some kind of issue where they can't take care of themselves or manage the healthcare system, it will fall on a family member. And when that family member becomes overwhelmed, they don't really know where to go. So my whole business model is that I called myself a care coordinator. And so a family would link up with me and say, here's my older parent. I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what's happening. They're going from rehab to hospital or whatever the situation is. And I would just dive into this family's story. And at first I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But slowly what I soon realized is slowly got my own process. And all of that process revolved around, let's figure out the information and the team around your parent, because we want to understand how we're going to piece who is on our team. Are they the best people? And what are they saying about your parent so that we can get a bigger picture of what's happening? Because often families didn't feel validated in what they were, when they were talking to doctors seemed overwhelmed in dealing with their older parent. Like, it was just this total show that just was kind of heartbreaking on some levels. And then here in the middle is this poor older adult. And so I would interject myself into that relationship. And I probably attended between 400 and 500 hours of medical appointments with older adults. And what became very evident to me in traveling with this older adult from service to service, hospital to rehab to
was that
whatever they
just
had.
one client, one person, or multiple clients?
I found that my quota because this gets into the issue of scalability, right? I thought I could start
Yeah.
this business and grow it here in central Indiana.
Okay.
And I realized I topped out about 9, and then I became very not effective for a family
Okay.
because I was starting like into the world of Google Drives and creating my own systems and like Google
Mm.
Docs on how we were going to chart. Like I was almost creating my own like EHR for like my patients and how
Hmm.
and helping explain it to families. And we used a few free like caregiving type apps, and they would do
Okay.
so good, so much, but we spent and when I started hiring nurses, it was very costly for them to spend their time constantly updating these information systems that should be working for us easier. And so I lived actually next to a gentleman that's been in the technology side of SaaS and products for like 8 years. And I've bugged him with all kinds of wild brain ideas that I had. And then finally, when I brought over this idea of Jim, like a family, it's, everything, like the family is like the center, and they don't have their own way to communicate. That usually falls on one person to like maintain the information and the, process of everything. And
Right.
then it will just overwhelm them. And then that's usually when they would hire me. And so I had this like aha moment of like, if families are willing to pay me $85 an hour, what could I do? What were the like wins from that business model to figure out what could I do with technology to make it more accessible to more families so that they weren't getting into these problems or trouble areas. They're more proactive and ready for these situations. And that's when, I mean, it's kind of when I think we first called ourselves
Mhm.
Guff Care or something awful, but we ended up becoming Primary Record.
Do you think so? This idea came up when you have been dealing with elderly people, right? Or maybe people that came out of the hospital or are or were sick. Do you think is that your client persona, or do you want to start before that happens?
No, honestly, the older adults are usually pretty unaware of the failure of the information system around them. The
Okay.
user persona that I dealt with most on the phone and was their adult children, because it
Yeah.
was
Okay.
falling on them to maintain. And what became apparent is not only are they trying to do their parents' health, but they have their own family, their own health. And then because usually a caregiver for one person in a family is a caregiver for many,
Yeah.
and then they've got Aunt Sally that's also just went in the nursing home. Like, and so it became this like female figure, honestly,
Right.
because I think
Yeah. Yeah.
70% of our family
Hmm.
caregivers are female. That is just what they call the sandwich generation, right? They're just caught right smack in the middle of aging
Hmm.
parents and also, kids and other family members. So that's kind of who I think of often when we're kind of building our products. And when we started talking to these females, what we learned is that they're dealing often with aging parents, or they're dealing with kids that have medical complex conditions that have multiple providers. So
Okay. Why do you think that the healthcare industry has so many technology needs? We have worked with multiple clients in the healthcare industry, and on top of that, something that I don't know, I think about it is that there are so many regulations like HIPAA. You have to be HIPAA compliant, and there are so many things around how you manage data, like healthcare data, right? But even though with those requirements or that those levels of complexity for small and medium businesses to handle data, there are still so many needs. Do you think like the Silicon Valley, the technology industry hasn't looked into the healthcare industry, or because at the end the healthcare industry has a lot of money, right? There's a lot of
mhm.
money involved. So why are there so many technology needs in an industry that does have and make a lot of money?
That's a good question. And I guess the view I have now in just trying to enter this space, I don't think there was the right policies and views of health information. I think HIPAA is wonderful. When you talk about protecting the patient, business to business, I understand the needs there. Um, but what has started to shift, I think, at the federal level, especially with there's this the recent Cures Act, is they're realizing when they're leaving it up to business, um, the incentives are misaligned and the information is not getting where it needs to be to help the patient and family the most. And because if you think about it, like I just changed my kids from our pediatric office to another primary care doctor. My pediatric office doesn't owe me anything in helping me get
Right.
information to
Yeah.
my primary care.
Yeah.
Um, I'm done with her. She's never going to get to bill me again. And she's a sweet woman. She doesn't think this way, but it's more
Mm-hmm.
work for her office to have to compile my records and mail them over or fax them. That's time that they don't have, especially during, this time. And so I think with the shift of, which I've always had this view, is why isn't the data more attached to the people and the
Okay.
families that it matters the most? Because honestly, I know where I'm going to go get my flu shots with my kid, and I know what doctor I want to go see. And granted, there's regulation around that with insurance and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think with that shift, there's now even like more of a tightening on health information because what I have seen is health information is very lucrative, and that's kind of sad to think
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so it's been fascinating to watch how America is going to deal with this opening of a gate. You're going to
Mm-hmm.
see a lot of questioning, right? And it's also what we're going to see too. I feel is HIPAA is I hold HIPAA in a very high esteem. I think it
Okay.
serves a purpose. I know there's a lot of Silicon Valley that despises what it does,
Right.
but I
Yeah.
think it's a safeguard to ensure, measures that are needed. Um, but what I always tell folks, because, this boom of consumer applications are not regulated by HIPAA.
Correct. Yeah, we're so used to share our information with anyone, like any
Right.
app. And then, so yeah, that'll be a challenge, especially for the new generations that are used to share everything. And then
Mhm.
who are you going to share your medical records or your
Right.
healthcare
And they
information
don't know
with?
quite the negative effects of it. And there's a lot of like,
Exactly.
the like scary stories here and there that you hear, but we haven't really seen what that's going to be like. And that's because when I started working with families on the outside, I was trying to hold myself to like HIPAA standards and, all this. And I remember one daughter being like, I don't care what I have to tell you. As long as my dad gets taken care of, that's what matters. And it just shows you too, like when you're in that crisis situation,
Yeah.
this willingness to share information as long as it helps your loved one. There's some feelings around that, but I think what we're going to see is what hasn't caught up is the Federal Trade Commission, which is where these consumer applications get regulated. I think
Mm-hmm.
needs to kind of beef up to make sure that all of these health consumer applications don't have too many bad actors, right? We're always going to have bad actors, just how the world works. But at the end of the day, I just hope for policies in our country that make sure that we have people with well intentions and good intentions helping families get their information to the right spot.
And do you think the FTC is doing or will do a good job regarding that?
Um, I don't know. I have a few friends that are in DC, and they,
Okay.
I think our politicians don't always understand the situation, and so
Right,
I
because
call
you have,
mine to make
yeah,
sure.
there are a lot
Yeah,
of things that can go bad. Technology moves very fast,
very
and
fast, and
we don't
policies
know
are
what's
not
going
catching up.
on. And the regulators are like stuck between technology that's going 100 miles per hour and politicians that just don't move. So it's kind of okay when we're talking just about technology, but we're talking about your personal healthcare information that can be misused or used to do some bad things. Then that's worrisome, right? It's not
It
as
is.
getting your
Yeah.
Facebook
No,
credentials.
and I think the public is because you also have public perception of all of that, right? So because I'm in a lot of different advisory boards and committees, and there was at a hospital, I'm like on a patient and family advisory council, and they were reviewing a consumer app, and I absolutely loved this gentleman was like 72 years old, And he raised his hand and he asked the like head product person, he goes, so if I'm not paying for this, that means I'm not your customer. So who is your customer?
Right.
Because we need to educate people to, if you're not paying for something, these companies
Someone is.
they don't exist without money. So you
Yeah.
have to, before you go and think it's wonderful, that this is all free, you know, um, and I know I'm awful at reading those terms and
Right.
conditions and,
Everybody is. Yeah.
and I've, even in our own ideas, I'm like, how do we make sure people know, how do you educate someone really easily on their level, right? It's almost like they do that
Mhm.
to bypass. I don't know. So I'm kind of going on a tangent.
So coming back to the app, um, to the primary record app, something that is usually very challenging, and I think you're doing a great job in that app, is providing a very good user experience, right? Because usually when we're building an app or we're developing software, anything, we think based on our experience, right? So if I'm recording instructions on how to do something, I think in a certain way because I've done that a million times. And then
Mhm.
when someone else sees that recording, they will probably won't understand because I am assuming a lot of things, right? How do you make sure that there are no assumptions? Because in an app like yours, that there are so many. I mean, the data is very important, and especially when we bring to play these like elderly or children with medical conditions, or I don't know, family members with medical conditions. uh, the data is very important that it's well documented, that the data is right and updated and everything's in there, right? So how has that process been for you guys to think in terms of your user? Like, I have no idea. Like, if I'm a user of your app, I have no idea about anything, right? And we
Mhm.
spoke about this a few months ago. I just had a baby. Like, I don't know. I want to start documenting his, I don't know, medical documents live, right? Somewhere. Uh, but I don't know how to do that. And that's something that you are doing in the app. How does that thought process has been in order to do that as well, and not only build the software and the app?
Yeah, I think this is where the Jim and Jean team, I think, is where we just really complement each other. But I think in general speak for anyone that's like, wow, this is really cool, low code. How do I build a really good product? And I mean, I'm just blessed to have a business partner that's done product development for like 20 plus years. And so the lessons
Okay.
that I have learned from him is you like when we very first started our ideas, all of our ideas came from my experience in those 400 hours of medical appointments, right? And all of the
Okay.
crying phone calls I've gotten. I was familiar with a problem of
Mm-hmm.
what families were experiencing. And when we went to try to figure out how we were going to solve that, we kind of just sketched up our ideas on like boards. And then we
Okay.
literally talked to 100 other families
Okay.
to ask them how they
Literally a
thought about
hundred
these ideas.
times.
Right. It's just that you need feedback. And this is where I feel like nurses are incredible. And I tell them in every like conference I'm at, because products that are focused on a problem of at a consumer level, not the admin people around a table
Mm-hmm.
trying to solve
Mm-hmm.
something, but the actual like frontline person interacting with the customer, because you are hearing all the feedback instantly. You know how they
Yeah.
feel about the system, or you know how they feel about that. And so that experience as a nurse and then Jim's product development just really helped us. Like we even today, Jesus, I think we had a conversation where we were disagreeing about something and we're like, all right, well, thank God this is low code because we'll just throw it in there and then we'll ask families what they think of it. And so then what we did is so people were fascinated in those interviews because they all had their system of what they were doing to keep track of
Right.
information. And they were
Yeah.
attracted to
Yeah.
this kind of other way to do it, and maybe one that might help them more. And so we've just kind of kept a little list and we just interact with that. We call our little beta families.
Okay.
And that's who's kind of been guiding us along the way. Um, and then our goal is, you're not going to hit the ground and have thousands of users joining. You just treat every customer and you get the feedback. Like even I was at my family dinner and I'm pulling up where primary record is now. And when I like see my family member struggling on an area, I ask them questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, what are
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
thinking right now? Or, well, why would you pick that versus that? And then you just learn and then you just kind of keep reiterating. So that's what we've been doing for like a year and a half.
That's important. And that's why we tell people like, your app is a baby. You have to take care of it every single
Yeah.
day and you have to work on this every single day because people like you assume things that your users won't understand.
Yes.
So that's something that's very, very usual.
You have assumptions and where, being belonging to a nursing community, I know that I have a really good sense of geriatrics, but when I have a pediatric question,
Mm-hmm.
then I lean on my NICU nurses. Like, okay, what do
Okay.
families say about this? Or, so it's just using your resources to, but I think that's the hardest part is realizing you are making assumptions because when you're in the weeds, it's hard. So that's where, sometimes just use your kid. Like I have a 13-year-old, I'll hand them the app and ask them questions, because you just can't see the problems because you've been looking at it for so long.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. If you were not doing this, what would you be doing? Like work
Say that again.
related.
Sorry.
If you were not doing this, like the business that you have and the app, what would you do? I
According
mean,
to my husband, I'd
the
probably just
question
be
is,
giving.
where do you see an opportunity for you to leave a mark, probably in the healthcare industry, or maybe some other industry that you like?
Oh, that's a really hard question. I can only picture this.
Okay.
I would, I do a lot of volunteer work,
Okay.
um, but I think I am just, I'm so dying. Because the healthcare system is so focused on patient centered and it's driving me crazy. So if I could just change some of that language to make healthcare realize you see the patient once a year. Who else is taking care of them the other 364? It's
Right.
family, it's some support network. So I think the biggest impact I would love to make on any of this is changing this view of when you have a patient, broadening that view to realize that patient belongs to a community, right? And family is very loosely defined. It could be the neighbor that helps out here and there, but
Mm-hmm.
how
Mm-hmm.
do we in healthcare, and HIPAA's really kind of eroded that, this idea of we want to be private with just our patient. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so trying to figure out ways to safely broaden that scope that'd be icing on the cake for me. Making sure that people get taken care of and because the other hand is I'm married to a provider, right? So he is
Okay.
also stressed out by this entire system. So I think
Yeah.
in my heart, I believe everybody is trying their best to help that patient in the bed, but everyone's kind of getting this us versus them mentality. And I guess I'm with my product of primary record or Gemini's product, just trying to level that playing field because here you have this giant EHR you turn to with any question that sometimes doesn't have accurate information. I want the family to come to the table armed with their own and empowered with their own information to help that interaction go quicker,
Mm-hmm.
um, and be more effective to make sure we arrive at a plan, to really make sure everybody gets taken care of. I'd
Yeah,
so.
that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Now, regarding primary record, what would you think? I mean, when we're speaking about launching your idea with an app or with software, uh, ideally we are thinking in steps, right? So, as soon as the app's finished, what would be your first goal for the app?
The first goal of the app is to put in the hands of our beta families that we've been promising a year for an app,
Okay.
and
And
to
what is the
hear
end goal?
the end
Is the
goal.
end goal getting funding and building
Oh,
a
gotcha.
massive
Yes. And
platform?
so our end goal with using kind of this low code is learning and learning enough to evaluate that we figured out a way to solve a problem.
Okay.
And now we have seen many other ways that we could accelerate this application and make it even better. But that would all come with the need for funding. So yeah, so Jim and I are
Right.
bootstrapping this idea, and that's where low code becomes instrumental. And the things that we need to learn are amazing with what you guys are building into our product so that we can quickly see all of some of because we still have tons of assumptions in that app that are going to
Mm-hmm.
help get
Mm-hmm.
clarified along the way. But yeah, our end goal is if we can get 100 people saying that this is helping them and oh my gosh, it saved, this much time in a doctor's office or a doctor recommending it. Those to me
Okay.
are all wins, that then we would just be pushing forward to get this out there into the world.
Cool. That's great. Another question is, um, I mean, you have Jim who has a lot of experience, but if you were to do this all over again, what would be, what would you suggest a non-technical founder when they're evaluating different options, either no code or low code or code, right? What would be something that you would tell a founder that wants an app or an MVP, like this is very important?
I think the biggest piece for us, and I guess I learned it from Jim, is if you've got an idea, try to do it on your own. Don't go right for venture capital, right? Because then you
Okay.
kind of lose your traction of your idea, because you probably had a really good idea and you were probably solving a problem. But when you start involving other people, your idea sometimes gets contorted and it doesn't go in the
Mm,
direction that you hoped. That's kind of like my first piece. But if I was a nurse on my own, I would hope that I would figure out that there was this thing called low code and that there was agencies like yours, right, that I could just go to with ideas. I'm sure it would not go as well as it's going with Jim involved,
yeah.
um, but I think it's creating this space because nurses are not very technical and we're kind of
Right.
intimidated by that. But when there's these stories of nurses building their own products from problems, trying to solve problems that they see every day in their workflows.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
they are able to do that by just teaming up and paying this much, fractions comparing to going into development. Um, I think it serves like a wonderful pathway, for someone to just validate. Because there's always like when you're like an entrepreneur, like you're doing this, you're like sometimes you're working a job and then trying to see if you should let go of that to go. It
Yeah.
just gives you that needed confidence to know I do have a good idea
Right.
and I got all of this data and now I'm ready for like the next thing. So you can unload that paying job and really take that leap because that's sometimes the scariest leap I think for
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Yeah. So get beta users and validate fast.
Hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Nope, exactly. I mean, and I did learn, and it's hard because we fall in this trap too, as I've mentioned already, make sure they're beta users that are not friends and family.
Yeah. Yeah. You need honest feedback. That's
Yeah.
true.
People, yes. And sometimes you have to be like the weird person at like the grocery store, like accosting people in public, What do you think of this? Or what is that problem? Like, would you use this?
Yeah, it's important to get good feedback. A lot of feedback. Yeah, that
Mhm.
defines the roadmap for the project on the long term.
Mhm.
Cool. Where can people find uh, the Primary Record app, or more about you or the business, your business, Primary Record?
Yes. Right now, I mean, we have like our own little like we threw up a website, but that's going to be further developed out as soon as we can get this application up and running. So just at, www.primaryrecord.com
Okay,
is where they would find information out about us and then of where we're at in this journey. So
great. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to get this app out and in the hands of your beta testers.
I'm
It's a
excited for
great
you
app.
to be a beta
It's
tester
really
because I
quite
picked up on
something.
that,
Very
Jesus.
yeah. It's really, yeah, I think we are very proud of what we have done so far.
You should.
You and Jim have a lot of uh, experience and great feedback. So it's a very polished MVP.
I
There are
know. And
some
it
apps,
may
there are
be,
some MVPs that are just like out
no, and
there.
it may be too
Uh,
polished. Like, that's okay. That might be some feedback for us. But, you get into this paralysis of, when
yeah.
to, I mean, we probably could have published something, last year, but
Yeah, no,
um,
it's way more polished than most MVPs. So
we've
that's
had a
good.
lot of
It's great. It's
feedback.
a very robust app. It's a large app. It does a lot of things, and it does things very well.
Hmm.
Because I think that's the goal, right? We have so many apps in our phone that you don't open them at all. So you have to have a good reason to open Primary Record rather than storing something in your Notes app.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
As
No,
long
exactly.
as
Or putting
that
the
happens.
doctor's phone in your contact list. Like what's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
benefit of putting it in your primary record? And so that's what we hope. We
exactly.
just hope from that moment someone does that, they see the value. So
Absolutely.
that's our goal.
Yeah. Jean, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, you did so wonderful. This is fun. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.